changing who I am. I'm making a new plan, rearranging my life, and I won't look back ever again.
You ain't see me activated. You better hope that you never see me agitated. I think about my actions, plan them out, evaluated. That's how I end up on the top, man, I'm calculated. My mind's a weapon, my body is the engine. I'm never second guessing, I just do what I was destined. Cause I feel I got the blessing, persistence and obsession. That's how you keep progressing, I already learned that lesson, yeah.
I'm changing who I am. I'm making a new plan, rearranging my life, and I won't look back ever again. You can't stop what's moving. You can't stop what's moving.
What's up, cool people? My name's Matt, aka That Random Christian Gamer, and welcome to tonight's live stream. So, tonight we are continuing our Bible study in the book of Job, and I guess now we've gotten to the point where Job has said enough for his friends to start chiming in a second time. I doubt they're gonna have... I doubt whatever insights they might have to share are gonna be, you know, too much of anything that'll convince Job that he's in the wrong or anything like that. But still, the back and forth still seems to have nuggets here and there that are worth looking into and discussing. But anyway, after all that Bible study, we'll just kind of hang around, chill, chat, and talk about whatever while I play some more PowerWash Simulator. And yes, I still have more things that I can do in that game. I mean, it happens when you only play it like maybe once a month, if even that, and only for like an hour each time. So, yeah. Real quick, want to say quick thanks to people who followed, seemingly all from the most recent raid that we did last week. So we raided TC Warrior ETP, who then followed and gave a shout out on his channel, and then two other people. I guess the one goes by God's Goat, but spelled with like a 0 and a 4 in the OA spots. And then Reborn 9822. Both followed seemingly in response to the shout out. So yeah, if y'all happen to be here, appreciate it. And Seth has joined the chat. Hello, Seth. Hope you're doing well. And yes, the exercise redemptions are back. My calf muscle is pretty much good now. So that stuff's back on the table. And yeah, I think I'll just pin that for now, and we could figure out what exactly I'm doing a bit later. Alrighty. So, with all that out of the way, I suppose I'll go ahead and run the early set of ads on Twitch, and then we can hop into the Bible study. So, Twitch folks, I will see you in a bit, I guess. Yeah. I can get into more detail on this later, but I've had kind of a busy week. It'll give me something to share while I'm playing PowerWash Simulator, you know, if the chat isn't particularly active anyway. Okay. So, gotta set up Bible study stuff here. Gonna turn the music down even slightly further. And hop into this right here. Sorry about that. But, you know, early start to the day, plus busy week leading up to this point. And all I'm going to say about it for now is that, like, I've essentially had something going on every day, after work so far this week. And that includes, sorry, let me rewind that thought. And that, basically, each one of those things was, like, at least an hour long. Plus, then I was actually at work an extra half hour today, just hammering out some details on something before I left. But anyway. Okay. So, I'm just realizing I could have, grabbed the dice tower and gotten that stuff ready while the break was in progress. Oh well. There's always later for that, too. So, it is time for Bible study. So we're looking at Job chapter 15, and, Job's situation was really good, but God kind of agreed to let him be tested. So, lost everything that he had, was physically afflicted with boils, and apparently he's also had, like, these disturbing visions and such. And so Job and his three of his friends who initially went there to comfort him, or at least, sit there with him while he was mourning. Job and these three friends have kind of gone around in some discussion about his situation. Job has maintained his innocence throughout, and, like, the Bible doesn't say that he was guilty of anything, just that he was being tested. But his friends all seem to assume that he's guilty of some sort of sin. And if not him, then his children or somebody else, directly connected with him. But Job continues to say that he's innocent, and now, like, he's had sort of a back and forth with each friend before this point in the chapter. Meanwhile, he has, he has poured out his emotions regarding his situation and just how, it seems like it's not even worth living if he's gonna continue being like this. But also, he wants to kind of, like, plead his case to God. Those are the main things that he has said all throughout the conversation. So, it looks like now Eliphaz has some more to say. So, we've entered round 2 of comments from Job's friends. Let's see what we get here in chapter 15 from Eliphaz. Then Eliphaz the Temanite replied, "A wise man wouldn't answer with such empty talk. You are nothing but a windbag. The wise don't engage in empty chatter, and what good are such words? Have you no fear of God, no reverence for him? Your sins are telling your mouth what to say. Your words are based on clever deception. Your own mouth condemns you, not I. Your own lips testify against you." Yeah, it's a bit of an assumption there, again, but they have continued assuming things about Job. And, I mean, if they're really so convinced that he's in the wrong, I mean, even if they're not convinced that he's in the wrong, like, some of these things that he has said about God and the way God interacts with people just sounds kind of rough, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, it makes God sound like he's okay with evil, cruelty, unfairness, and I mean, it's certainly something that exists in life. So, like, I guess it's kind of hard to argue against God at least allowing those things. But doesn't mean God likes those things. It's more so that it might just be a fact of a broken world in which sin exists. But again, to people, well, especially to people like Job's friends, who are convinced that bad things really only happen to bad people, yeah, I'm not surprised they would say that, Job's words are empty and just him blowing wind. Or, I don't know if that's the right phrase to use there, but, like, him just spitting hot air. And really, in fact, Job's words about God may now be convincing Eliphaz that much further that Job is so far, fallen into his sinful nature that he isn't even really thinking about what he's saying. It's just that the sin is practically speaking for him. But there's still quite a bit Eliphaz has to say here, so rather than continue dwelling on the first section, as I've been prone to doing, let's move along to verse 7. Were you the first person ever born? Were you born before the hills were made? Were you listening at God's secret counsel? Do you have a monopoly on wisdom? What do you know that we don't? What do you understand that we do not? On our side are aged, gray-haired men, much older than your father. Is God's comfort too little for you? Is his gentle word not enough? What has taken away your reason? What has weakened your vision that you turn against God and say all these evil things? Can any mortal be pure? Can anyone born of a woman be just? Look, God does not even trust the angels. Even the heavens are not absolutely pure in his sight. How much less pure is a corrupt and sinful person with a thirst for wickedness? So, he does also, I think Eliphaz made sort of a similar appeal to tradition, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. Because he's basically saying in this verse in particular here that it's like, yeah, just ask, these people we know who are old and wise what they would say about your situation, and they would also be convinced that your sin is the problem here. And then he also kind of continues on his earlier point of, like, saying nobody's fully righteous before God. We all are sinful by nature. And so whether you can think of a specific thing that you did or not, there's got to be something that caused God's anger to rage against you like this, to take away everything that you had, and to leave you afflicted with boils, and whatever other horrible things have been happening to you, Job. Like, Eliphaz is convinced this stuff doesn't happen without a particular reason. And I guess, you know, when he asks what has taken away Job's reason and such things, it's like, well, I almost would think he kind of has his own answer to that. Although maybe not, because, like, he could assume that it's, you know, well, no, maybe not. Maybe he can't just assume that it was, you know, the tragedy that has befallen Job that, you know, has caused Job to be so supposedly unreasonable. Because if that stuff was really a punishment for Job's sin, then his sin must have, quote unquote, blinded him and taken away his reason before any of that punishment came. But again, we know it's just a test. It's not a punishment. And it really, a big part of the difference here between Job and his friends is that his friends seem to want to look at the whole situation as kind of black and white. Meanwhile, Job is looking a little more into the sort of gray area, or more accurately, he's like digging deeper into the details of how life really is when Job has responded. So, yeah. But again, for somebody who's already sort of like pre-convinced that, you know, Job is guilty, it's no wonder that Eliphaz would kind of continue hammering in these points in the hopes of potentially getting Job to see the error of his ways, even though he's not really in error. But Eliphaz doesn't know that. So, let's have a look-see here at some of the notes from the translators. In verse 12, it could say, why do your eyes flash with anger? In Hebrew reads, why do your eyes blink? Instead of saying, what has weakened your vision? I guess. Sorry. I guess any of that sort of implies, you know, even however temporary it might be, you know, a lack of sight, vision, whatever you want to call it, on Job's part. So, you know, it's Eliphaz is still basically, you know, using metaphors for that in all likelihood. Now, why do your eyes flash with anger? I mean, that being blinded with rage is a somewhat common phrase that people use to describe someone who's just like so angry, they have no control, they don't think about what they're doing for even a split second. So, yeah, in any case, I mean, I don't think he's referring to literal vision here. More so, like, because it's been commented on earlier in the discussion that, you know, Job had wise words for the people who sought him, at least before all this happened. So Eliphaz is like, okay, you were like this before, wise and full of, you know, good words, and you could see clearly how other people could be helped. Where did that go? And now down here in verse 15, Hebrew just says the holy ones instead of the angels. And so that's something Eliphaz also brought up before, I think. And sorry, man. So, like, saying God doesn't trust the angels might sound a little weird, but if you consider the commonly believed lore of Lucifer trying to rebel and overthrow God, then, yeah. Plus, I mean, it might not even be a total distrust, as in, like, no, I can't let you do or know anything. Obviously, the angels, at least the heavenly angels, are in his presence. So, like, it's not a nope, you're completely out of the loop on everything. But there is some stuff that God does not share with anyone or any being that exists. So Eliphaz is like, well, if God doesn't even trust the angels who are right there in heaven with him, serving him by his side constantly, and like kind of sort of believed to be holier than people, how much less is God going to trust a person who is sinful? So if you think you're righteous, I highly doubt it, is kind of what Eliphaz is saying. Okay, on to verse 17. If you will listen, I will show you. I will answer you from my own experience. And it is confirmed by the reports of wise men who have heard the same thing from their fathers, from those to whom the land was given long before any foreigners arrived. The wicked writhe in pain throughout their lives. Years of trouble are stored up for the ruthless. The sound of terror rings in their ears, and even on good days they fear the attack of the destroyer. They dare not go out into the darkness for fear they will be murdered. They wander around saying, "Where can I find bread?" They know their day of destruction is near. That dark day terrifies them. They live in distress and anguish, like a king preparing for battle. For they shake their fists at God, defying the Almighty. Holding their strong shields, they defiantly charge against him. I'll read this next little section too. These wicked people are heavy and prosperous. Their waists bulge with fat. But their cities will be ruined. They will live in abandoned houses that are ready to tumble down. Their riches will not last, and their wealth will not endure. Their possessions will no longer spread across the horizon. Okay, see, now, in that last little section, Eliphaz finally seems to be acknowledging something that Job mentioned before. Although, maybe Eliphaz said something like this before, or at least one of the friends did, where, so Job had kind of said at one point that good things don't only happen to good people. There are some wicked people out there who have wealth and prosper in other ways, and like God doesn't immediately strike them down for their wickedness. They still live on with their luxurious lives, and even in many cases continue doing wrong, including towards other people. But now Eliphaz is kind of saying, well, yeah, evil people might have wealth and prosper for a while, but eventually their judgment is coming. They will not, get to stay like that forever. And really, some, if not most of them, kind of behave in these ways that he described in the prior verses, where they're just constantly worried about, who might be out to get them, so to speak, or just in general ways that they might potentially lose the things that they've gained. Because having such wealth and prosperity easily makes them targets. And also, if they've done wicked things, especially to other people, that also makes them targets for revenge from those people. So, yeah, Eliphaz is, again, kind of responding to Job's thought that wickedness seems to sort of be allowed by God. By saying that, yeah, sure, for a little while, but eventually they get their comeuppance. Well, especially, if they continue to defy/resist God. Okay. Making sure I don't miss any notes here. There's one in verse 23. So the Greek version of this reads, he is appointed to be food for a vulture. Yeah, okay, that's kind of like... Well, okay, I guess the similarity in wording it that way, or wording it those two different ways, is that, like, someone who's wandering around asking where they can find bread obviously is having trouble finding food and very likely kind of wasting away, which would then make it seem like they're soon going to die and be food for vultures. So, yeah, that, again, just another point of emphasizing that, like, yeah, these people who are wealthy, while these evil people who are wealthy are going, or, I don't know, that kind of comes right after the part where he talks about them being afraid to go into the darkness for fear they'll be murdered. So I think it's just another added point of, like, their own fear and dread, and, like, they worry about every little thing because the slightest risk or misstep could potentially lead to them losing their livelihoods, if not their lives, straight up. So, yeah. It becomes all the more obvious what he's getting at with these last, or with these few verses here. Okay. More about these evil people in verse 30. They will not escape the darkness. The burning sun will wither their shoots, and the breath of God will destroy them. Let them no longer fool themselves by trusting in empty riches, for emptiness will be their only reward. They will be cut down in the prime of life. Their branches will never again be green. They will be like a vine whose grapes are harvested too early, like an olive tree that loses its blossoms before the fruit can form. For the godless are barren. Their homes, enriched through bribery, will burn. They conceive trouble and give birth to evil. their womb produces deceit. So that's kind of almost just wrapping his statement up in a bow, saying like, yeah, their riches won't last, and they fear for their lives constantly because, you know, to use his words here, they conceive trouble, like, because of their evil deeds and all the various ways that they potentially sow evil among the people and before God. Eventually, they're gonna leave with nothing. Their lives will be deemed empty because all that they've done is seek an empty treasure. And that, I mean, I think he specifically mentions riches here, but like, could be fame as well, or I don't know, insert other similar things that are just like, you know, they don't really serve any kind of purpose eternally. So, yeah. I suppose that wraps up my thoughts on Job chapter 15. Like, there's kind of some actually decent stuff that Eliphaz said here, but again, the fact that it's like sort of coated in a blanket of assuming too much about Job's situation, probably rings a bit hollow, like pretty much everything Job's friends have said up to this point. But next chapter we'll get Job's response, or at least part of it. Okay, before I start reading and talking about that, let me get some water here. Real quick, checking my phone too, because there's been some notifications on there. Okay. And I suppose then I can get to chapter 16, which, at least verse-wise, is notably shorter. Here we go. Okay, Job chapter 16. So there's been some back and forth discussion between Job and his friends about his situation, you know, that situation being the just complete loss of basically everything that he had, which was quite a bit because he was noted as wealthy, but Job's friends assume, because of their sort of theological framework, that Job is being punished for some kind of sin. But we, the readers, know that Job is just being tested. God allowed Job to be tested by Satan because God was like, look at how awesome this dude Job is. And Satan's like, yeah, well, take his stuff away and, you know, make him all sickly and then see if he doesn't curse you to your face. So, yeah. Job has maintained his innocence because, like, there's nothing in particular that he did to I don't know if justify is quite the right word, but to deserve all this stuff happening to him, especially as a punishment. But his friends keep assuming he's guilty because they think, really, in the grand scheme of things, only bad things happen, or bad things only happen to bad people. Eliphaz, in the last chapter, kind of responded to an earlier point of Job's by saying that, yes, some wicked people do have wealth for a time, but eventually that fades away. Now, for us in the current era of existence, I think it's pretty safe to say that Eliphaz's words come with a little grain of salt. Because while wicked people who are rich might be punished when they get to eternity, when they're no longer in this life, seems kind of tough nowadays to get even wicked wealthy people to really suffer too many consequences for their actions in this life. So, Eliphaz kind of has a point, whether it's while those people are living or in eternity. But again, if he's trying to imply all of this stuff about Job, that's where he is dead wrong. So, we'll see what Job says in response to Eliphaz here in chapter 16. Then Job spoke again. I have heard all this before. What miserable comforters you are. Won't you ever stop blowing hot air? What makes you keep on talking? I could say the same things if you were in my place. I could spout off criticism and shake my head at you. But if it were me, I would encourage you. I would try to take away your grief. Instead, I suffer if I defend myself, and I suffer no less if I refuse to speak. Yeah, so keep in mind, originally, when Job's friends came to him, they were trying to comfort him. After a week, though, apparently they feel like they gotta teach Job something. Either just because they don't like some things that Job has said, and or because they really do think that Job must have sinned significantly to deserve all that happened to him. But either way, their initial goal of comforting him is not being helped at all by their words. Especially because they continue to accuse him of being sinful and deserving at least the punishment, air quote punishment, that he's gotten, if not more. So, now I'm also noting in the back and forth, there seems to be, like, every iteration, there's now, like, a comment on something like blowing hot air, or, like, essentially aimless, continual, unimportant words being spoken. And they're each saying that about each other. Like, Job is now saying that to Eliphaz. Eliphaz basically said that about what Job was saying before. So, both of them, or both parties, seem to think that the other's words are unhelpful. And Job is trying to argue that, like, that he would take the high road in this situation, or at least, try a little harder to comfort a friend in a tough time. Whereas these three seem to care more about spitting their theology and teaching Job a lesson. So, yeah. There's some of Job's initial thoughts here. Basically telling Eliphaz, yeah, you're kind of being a crappy friend here. And now we'll see what else he says in verse 7. "O God, you have ground me down and devastated my family. As if to prove I have sinned, you've reduced me to skin and bones. My gaunt flesh testifies against me. God hates me and angrily tears me apart. He snaps his teeth at me and pierces me with his eyes. People jeer and laugh at me. They slap my cheek in contempt. A mob gathers against me. God has handed me over to sinners. He has tossed me into the hands of the wicked." Okay, now, this phrase right here stuck out in particular to me. Trying to think through, like, this, I guess this could be understood as Job trying to say, like, God is doing all this to make it look like Job sinned when he didn't. And or, like, Job feels that God is just trying to make an example of him. And is bringing a ridiculously harsh punishment on a relatively minor sin that Job probably committed at some point in his life. But the punishment's got to be super severe to show that even the most minor thing deserves this much, potentially even worse. I think that's what Job is kind of saying that he feels in this moment. Not saying that's the truth of what God does and how he treats our sin. Of course, now, post Jesus, there's a whole different interaction between us and God and sin anyway. But yeah, I mean, like, as his friends are kind of proving, Job's current situation essentially makes the people around him assume that he must have sinned. He must have done something pretty stinking bad in order to, now Job is describing his flesh as gaunt, and the image that comes to my mind there is of, like, okay, real quick comparison. If you've seen the, animated Disney Hercules movie, that part where Hercules jumps into the, I almost wanted to call it the Well of Souls. I don't know if that's what it's called there or if that's a Darksiders term, but, he jumps into the pool of dead people and he starts, like, aging really quick and his skin's all wrinkly and he gets super thin and puny looking. Like, that's what I imagine when Job describes his, quote, gaunt flesh. And of course, like, in some ways, we tend to kind of make some similar assumptions about people today. Like, it's a pretty common thought or assumption about homeless people, especially those who go out onto the street and hold up a sign asking for money. You know, such people. There's definitely a tendency for some to assume that, like, A, they're just lazy, B, they threw all their money away, or, you know, C, they did something really messed up to just lose everything that they had. Similar idea here with Job. He's saying that his current condition pretty much causes the people around him to assume that he has done something bad. And then he goes on to talk about how it feels like, or how he feels that God is treating him and viewing him due to all this stuff that he has dealt with. Okay. On to verse 12. I think I'll read through the end of the chapter at this point because that last section is kind of short. Anyway, verse 12. I was living quietly until he shattered me. He being God, I assume. He took me by the neck and broke me in pieces. Then he set me up as his target, and now his archers surround me. His arrows pierce me without mercy. The ground is wet with my blood. Again and again he smashes against me, charging at me like a warrior. I wear burlap to show my grief. My pride lies in the dust. My eyes are red with weeping. Dark shadows circle my eyes. Yet I have done no wrong, and my prayer is pure. O earth, do not conceal my blood. Let it cry out on my behalf. Even now my witness is in heaven. My advocate is there on high. My friends scorn me, but I pour out my tears to God. I need someone to mediate between God and me, as a person mediates between friends. For soon I must go down that road from which I will never return. And there's some other things that Job has said before that are kind of reappearing, like the mediator idea, the notion that he kind of assumes he's going to die soon, probably because of his condition, meaning, you know, like his overall state at the moment. So like he keeps saying that God must be angry with him. I mean, God hates me and angrily tears me apart. But also, still saying that he's crying out to God more than to anybody else in his time of need. Like, even if we assume that God really did hate Job and wanted him to suffer for something in particular, which is not true, but if we make that assumption, even then, really, God is still the one who can best change our situation, who has the most power to, you know, bring us peace and hope. So, I still think that line in particular, really, as well as, I mean, the general collection of things Job has said. Like, I think those kinds of phrases still very much at least imply that Job hasn't, like, given up on his faith. He hasn't, like, figured it's pointless to continue turning to God yet. So, even though he doesn't like all this stuff that he sees happening to him and feels, and he's still, like, sticking it out and, you know, turning to, again, he's turning to God because he knows that God is the one who could set it all right again, if God so willed. There is a note here in verse 13. I'll get to that for sure before I wrap things up. And yeah, this stuff right here is kind of like almost Job describing the very circumstances that Satan thought would get Job to lose his faith, essentially. Because he was living very well. And, you know, peacefully. It says quietly there. I kind of imply that almost more as peacefully. But then, very comfortable, peaceful, great life to how could it possibly get any worse? Yeah. But again, Job still is like, God is still the one Job is determined to turn to in all this. Okay. Note here at the end of verse 13. The Hebrew says gall instead of blood there. I mean, in either case, it's whether... I mean, it's some sort of bodily fluid, I suppose. But, yeah. Job, somewhere in here, yeah, down here in verse 18 is like... Yeah, I'm, you know, there are obvious visible signs of how, like, unhealthy I am right now. And as sick and gross as it might be, like, I want that to serve as evidence of just how harshly God has brought his fist down upon me. So yeah, like I said, other stuff is kind of repeating things that he said before, so I'm not gonna belabor those points too much. But yeah, not so subtle little jab at his friends here, saying how they're... Well, at first he said they're not doing very well at comforting him. But also now he's even going as far as saying, like, yeah, they're basically ridiculing me. Because they assume that he is guilty of some kind of sin that brought all this stuff upon him as a punishment. But, yeah, that's all I got for thoughts on this chapter. So, there you have it. Job chapter 16. I didn't give a preview kind of the next chapter, but it's more of Job speaking, so Okay. Didn't give a preview while I was recording, I should say. Geez, verse-wise, that chapter is even shorter. But I'm definitely not planning on tacking any extra verses onto any live streams in the near future. I still need to, like, catch my game recordings up with Bible recordings to really kind of consider doing an extra chapter in a live stream. Anyway, okay. Meanwhile, I've had a minor stream connection issue, potentially. But oh well. Alrighty. More water. And I think it's about time we make good on at least one of those random exercise redemptions. So, let me grab my stuff. Alrighty. What are we going to get this week? Time to find out. Okay. Bringing up my list. I hope there weren't any changes to the list that were supposed to be made. I don't think so. Boop-a-doo. Stream exercises. There we go. Okay. Roll number 1 to see which kind of exercise that I'm doing. If I end up getting invisible chair, I have a thought on how I might handle that slightly differently. Okay. I have rolled a 4, which on my list here is push-ups. Let's see how many per set. Well, 1 per set is nothing, essentially. That's just doing each one individually. Okay. Sets of 3, and attempting at least how many sets? That's a 4. So, push-ups, sets of 3, minimum attempted 12. Okay. And yeah, I think I've got some time to knock that out before hitting up another ad break. I don't think I really need the exercise mat there so much just for push-ups. Okay. Here we go. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay. Man. That wasn't really so much my arms getting too tired as it was I was starting to feel a little weird, like, kind of acid reflux-ish thing going on. So I think for now, I shall leave it at that with push-ups. kind of wish I had a better idea what causes that acid reflux type stuff. Because, I mean, sometimes I'll just feel that kind of like burning sensation in my throat throughout the day. And like, I've eaten all kinds of different food, and nothing has really seemed like it obviously helps or hurts, probably because of the variety of different kinds of food I might eat in a day. Okay, random exercise times one eating. Okay, sharing that in the chat so I can then pin it for later. Okay. And it is at this point that I think I shall run the next set of ads on Twitch, and then hop on over to PowerWash Simulator. So, Twitch folks, I'll see you all in a little bit. And there we go. Okay. Let me make sure that I change the stream category on Twitch. PowerWash Simulator. I guess the second game does, exist at this point, but I believe I would have to purchase that one, whereas the first one I was able to download for free. Okay. Let's go ahead. Boot up the game. There we go. I think I might actually keep the background music that I've got going, because there's not a whole lot in the game itself that really, I mean, yeah, it might have sort of ambient noise, but I still don't think it's really anything that would clash too hard with the background music I've got going. I might just turn that down a bit further. Okay. In fact, you know what? I will turn down my own computer's volume a bit so I'm not hearing background music so loudly. That's how we'll handle that instead. Okay, so with PowerWash Simulator here, I think I technically still have one career job thing left. I'm not sure what all else I have in the specials. Now I completed the Tomb Raider and Final Fantasy stuff. FF7 in particular it is. All these ones with that little symbol there are ones that I would have to buy, I believe. I know, at least last time I looked at all of those, they each said that, yeah, gotta pay money for those. Seth says, do. What do? Right, so I did the ice rink. I thought I cleaned the Halloween house. I don't know why it's not counting that. Unless I was, like, that close to being done with it, and then I started something else, so it just completely erased my progress on the Halloween house. But we've got the cruise ship's on deck and Santa's workshop. I definitely feel like this time of year, the cruise ship would be more fitting. But I think that's pretty much it in terms of, like, jobs I have not done in the game. Honestly, I kind of want to see the end of the career mode before too long. Yeah. We were doing the Halloween house with a lot of randomizing the nozzles and extensions and things like that. And so, yeah, I don't know. We basically completed it, whether or not the game officially counts that as completed. But yeah, I think I'm gonna do this one here in the career mode. I think it's the last one. Now, I might genuinely not finish this in 1 hour. Yeah, it's looking a bit on the large side of things. Harper Shaw. Okay, I don't know. I honestly tend not to pay too much attention to what's being said. Also, feel free to let me know what you think about having my own background music going on while I'm playing the game. So, I might have mentioned this previously when playing this game, but there's kind of a theory, or maybe it's more than a theory and it's just people actually looking into the lore more carefully than I would. But I guess there's some thought out there that in the story behind this game, there's like an active volcano, and that's why all this stuff got so dirty. But even more than that, it might be some sort of like deity that some of the locals know about that's upset with them and causing the volcano to erupt and stuff of that sort. But in other news, not really news per se, but allow me to share what's been going on in my week, if you will. So, I've had kind of a busy week. Normally, I get at least a little bit of editing time on Wednesdays, maybe even on Tuesdays, but so this week, Monday after work, I had a church group. That's a normal thing. Tuesday after work, I met up with a church friend for dinner. Yesterday, I helped somebody from church with moving stuff, like specifically helping to get the stuff out of their apartment and move it into like a U-Haul truck thing. Now, I was not the only one by a long shot. There were probably like 10 people that showed up overall to help with this. But still, you know, just, I've definitely had some things going on this week. If I had too many weeks like this, I might actually start to fall behind in my, content, especially the, editing and such of videos. Also, as if my week hasn't been busy enough already, this weekend I'm, helping run one of the cameras, at least, for the tech team at church. So that's going to take up, four church services worth. So it's, for me, probably going to be from 4 o'clock-ish Saturday until 6:30 probably. And then on Sunday, it'll be 7:30-ish all the way until probably 12:30. So we're talking darn near, a typical, 8-hour-a-day work shift that I'll be, helping out at church, running that stuff. Oh, yeah, and it's Mother's Day weekend. So there will, of course, be something that I'll be doing with my family after all the church stuff is done. So yeah, busy week. Not necessarily bad, just busy, and again, definitely would make it difficult to keep up with content if I did this much every week. Fortunately, I don't think I have any other weeks quite like this on the horizon for quite a while. In fact, to the extent that I couldn't really tell you any in particular that I could think of. Any other weeks in particular that I would expect to be quite like this one. But yeah, anyway, there's my week for ya. Feel free to let me know how y'all have been. Oh, and as far as work stuff goes, work is work. We reintroduced a thing called cycle counts, which is essentially looking at specific parts in our inventory each week and actually physically counting them to see what we've actually got and if what we have in our, digital inventory system matches that. And if it doesn't, at least maybe put in some effort to figure out why. Now, if it's stuff that's little teeny tiny things, especially if we use it all the time and we're only a little bit off, that stuff is usually just kind of seen as well, stuff happens, whatever, we'll move on. But other things, we really shouldn't be getting too far off. Either because stuff is valuable, or because it's used so little that it's like, what even would be going on for us to get so far off track? But yeah, so that's been going on at work, but of course I still have my other responsibilities to take care of while I'm there. I've maybe been doing a little less of the wire cutting that I normally do because of needing extra time for the cycle counts. And so the one person who usually like does stuff with the wire after I cut it has also been stepping in and cutting wire for some of the more common things that we do. But yeah, okay, now I've talked about work stuff and not work stuff, so I think we've pretty much covered my week. So, I kind of alluded to this before, maybe a little bit, but if I end up getting enough weeks, without a whole lot going on, basically, if I'm able to get to where pretty much everything that I have recorded is then also edited and ready to go, I might then, end up doing a little bit of extra video recording stuff in a live stream or two. Especially gaming stuff, because right now the Bible study videos kind of have an extra week's worth of recordings more than what I have for gaming stuff. Now, there was a bit of a thought that crossed my mind that maybe I would, upon completing a game, especially if I end up completing said game in, the first hour of one of those recording sessions that are usually 2 hours, then maybe I would take the second hour and record a couple of, reviews, which I typically only make those about half an hour. So that could be a way where I would potentially get gaming stuff caught up. But there's one too many ifs for that to seem any kind of like an actual plan. That's not that bad. What, having an extra week of Bible study stuff compared to the gaming videos? Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just like, alright, if I'm going to intentionally record any extra of anything, it's probably going to be gaming stuff. And it's not even that the gaming stuff is behind. Again, it was more so that the Bible study stuff got ahead, just because of having a couple of streams where, or, you know, going through a couple of books of the Bible that had an odd number of chapters, and then I, for whatever reason, decided I didn't want to, like, start a book of the Bible in one stream, or, like, have two different books of the Bible in the same stream, I guess, was the thing that I didn't want for some reason. So then I was like, okay, well, we'll do one extra and finish this book of the Bible a couple of times. But yeah, so really, yeah, if I was behind on stuff, then I would not be, like, I would potentially not be putting gaming videos out for a week. But as things stand, like, I've got edits done for next week's stuff already. I just, like, well, so I've got edits done for next week's stuff already. I have, I think, the following week's stuff already recorded, but it's just that I have, like, a third week's worth of stuff recorded as far as Bible studies go. So yeah, really, if anything, it's more so me being like, hey, you know how we did extra Bible study chapter a couple of times? Well, don't be surprised if that happens at some point with gaming stuff. Because I would actually, there was one point, it feels like it must have been a couple of years ago by now, but it was definitely before I moved back up here from Texas. There was once a point at which I had, like, basically a whole month ahead of whatever week it was already recorded, edited, scheduled out on YouTube, and yeah, just with the move and other things happening, I guess that was part of that kind of falling off, which, again, I mean, as long as I can keep up, it's not necessarily bad. But I would like to, you know, especially for the sake of future trips / vacations, you know, future possible time off, with that possibility in mind, yeah, I would like to maybe have a good bit of buffer in between what I have done already and what I'm, you know, actively recording in a given week. My sleep schedule is already terrible enough as it is. I could not imagine how bad it would get if I kind of felt the crunch of needing to get the stuff I just recorded set and ready to go for next week. Okay, so Jeez, I've been cleaning for like 20 minutes, and this thing's only at 5%. Oh boy. Yeah, it's gonna take a little while. Even if I manage like 10% in an hour, that's still... Or, I mean, okay, the rate at which we're going could be 15% in an hour. But that would still take... what? I mean... 6 hours would be 90% then, so it would be... 6 2/3 hours to get this all cleaned. And that assumes a consistent rate of 15% in an hour. Try a different set and see if it works better. I mean... No, that's... If anything, I want the wider spray like this. But I don't know if I want it to be so wide that it, like, barely even gets anything on the first pass. So maybe I'll try this one. I mean... I guess there might technically be some, like, cleaning liquids I could try. But also, in the career mode, that stuff costs money. I realize I'm at the end of it, but I still, you know, stubborn gamer mentality is like, no, don't use the stuff. Plus, I don't know how well I don't know that I'm convinced it even works all that well compared to just cleaning with a decent degree nozzle. I mean, there's some stuff that's really freaking stubborn that, yeah, might actually call for that. Like, if I get to some actual rusted metal or whatever, yeah, okay. Might give that a quick spray with some of the metal cleaner, and then go back over it with a regular nozzle. Because I think that's how it's actually supposed to work. I don't know if that's how I've used it most of the time, but I'm pretty sure how it's actually supposed to work is that, you know, you take the soap stuff, do a quick spray over whatever area you're trying to clean, just so it has the soap on there, and then you hit it with the regular water. But yeah, also, okay, real quick. This place is tall. Normally the scaffolding gets at least close to the top of pretty much anything in the game. This is like practically a whole nother scaffolding taller than that. So yeah, I think it's just that this place is big. It's not even that I'm being, you know, terribly inefficient or anything like that. It's just a big place. Which, you know, it would definitely be fitting for the last job in the career mode. Okay, I kind of just wanted to do this side for now. At least start with just this side. So, I'm going to go back down over here. to finish what I've started on. No, I was trying to get up onto this. Here we go. Okay, Meh, oh well. I do wonder whether all the cleaning counts the same in this, though. Like, are there particular objects that, like, maybe because it's, maybe because certain objects are smaller or generally take less time and effort to clean, it's like, oh yeah, since you're making quicker progress on an object, does that then give you progress more quickly overall? I would think it should be designed in such a way that, no, the percentage you see in the corner there is just straight up how much of the overall dirt you've cleaned. Okay. Back down along here. You know, that's also something I haven't really done so much of, is like just kind of quick swapping between nozzles. Because, you know, if I'm a little farther away from something, and so the wider nozzle is a bit too weak at that distance, then why not just quick pull out a narrow nozzle, get that last little bit that's kind of far away more thoroughly. Alright. I'm going to ask a question that if I had a lot of people watching right now, I would potentially regret asking. I'm merely wondering about it. I'm not necessarily looking for people's thoughts on it, although I imagine if I had a lot of people watching, they would inevitably share their thoughts, and it would perhaps spark a massive discussion, even argument in the chat. But I'm just curious who all / how many people have maybe also heard about this whole, like, red and blue button moral dilemma thing that's been making its way around the internet lately. I don't know if it actually started recently, but boy, have I seen a bunch of posts about it recently. And if anyone is not familiar with what I'm talking about, feel free to let me know, and I will give you a general summary. I'm considering just explaining it anyway. So, I mean, at least for me, devoid of any other particular context, it seems like it started with some kind of post on like a social media page, more of a poll, I guess, but some page that seems like it's inclined to ask questions like this somewhat often asked anybody who saw the post essentially. So the situation is there are 2 buttons, one red, one blue. Well, you know what? No, I'm not going to say anything more than what I know applies to the situation. So, 2 buttons, one red, one blue. A bunch of people will be pressing the button. I don't know if it really specifies how many people. It might even just say everyone. But, bunch of people pressing one button or the other. Now, if 50% or more of people press the red button, then anybody who pressed the blue button ends up dying. But if 50% or more people press the blue button, everybody lives. So that's the general gist of it. And I have seen 2 massively different ways of thinking about this. Honestly, I think I've seen more posts from people trying to defend the red button, or explain their reasoning at least for the red button. Oh yeah, but of course, obviously, you being involved in this hypothetical red and blue button situation. So the question is, which button do you push? Knowing the possibilities there. Again, 50% or more people press the red button. Everyone who pushed blue dies. 50% or more of people push the blue button. Everyone lives. Which button do you push? And, well, I should rephrase that, because asking which button do you push makes it sound like it's more of a logic puzzle, whereas I don't know if that's really how it was supposed to be framed. The way the question was asked, I believe, is which button would you push? So, I suppose, I don't know. At this point, I'm talking about this just kind of to fill the time and maybe prompt some discussion if people are so inclined. So, I think really the point of it is that it's not supposed to be an obvious choice per se. Just different ways of thinking about it. So, the defense that I have seen and can kind of understand the logic behind for pushing the red button is that, well, A, pushing the red button guarantees your safety. Because even if you're in the minority in that situation, guess what? The majority chose blue, everyone lives. But if the majority press red, then guess what? You are one of the red button pushers, you still get to live. And that particular perspective focuses on the best chance of your individual survival. Now, a lot of people have added to that, basically framing it like, well, the blue button pushers are just throwing their lives away in order to maybe seem, valiant or something like that. For the sake, they're putting themselves at risk just for the sake of good intentions, even if it's otherwise completely impractical. That's how the red button pushers have been framing it. Now, I have seen far less from people who say they would push the blue button. But what I have read from them is that, well, for one, part of the advantage of pressing the blue button is that it is the easier way to get the ideal scenario. That, of course, being that everybody lives. Because in order for everybody to survive, with the red button being the majority, well, suddenly now, literally everyone, 100% of people, must push the red button for everyone to live. Whereas, in order for everyone to live under a blue button majority, you only need 50% of people. Well, just over 50%. So, I mean, really it is kind of more so, alright, is your mindset focused more on sort of a survival of the fittest / purely logical standpoint, at least for your own survival? Or is your focus more on the collective and reaching the quote-unquote ideal scenario? It's not even necessarily a, well, this is right and this is wrong. It's just, it's almost more so something designed to reveal one's thought process. Now, the only other thing I will add to this discussion, and I might even make some sort of video about it in the future. So, nearly everyone defending the stance of pushing the red button has attempted to reframe the situation in such a way that they make it sound like the blue button pushers are just throwing their lives away. And that really existence of the blue button slash, people pushing the blue button just presents an unnecessary problem. Again, that's how those people are framing it. What has surprised me a bit is the lack of people, defending the blue button, and the lack of people defending the blue button who then say that, well, it's actually the red button that causes the problem, because, I mean, maybe they do kind of say it just word it differently, but in a way I could definitely see some people saying that, well, it's actually the red button that causes the problem because it gives people kind of the easy self-preservation option and, what they will generally say is that, well, the red button pushers are the ones, defending the option that gets some of the other people killed. If there's enough red button pushers, like, that's the scenario in which other people die, not the blue button. But, like, I'm surprised I haven't heard someone defend the blue button in a way that pretty much says what the people defending the red button have said, but just, with the opposite. So, like, saying that the red button is the problem, or the red button is the one presenting a problem that otherwise shouldn't exist. It seems to only be the red button pushers being like, yeah, well, if you push the red button, nothing happens. No. If you push the red button, you increase the chances that anybody who doesn't do the same as you dies. Meanwhile, if you push the blue button, you increase the chances that even those who don't do the same as you end up surviving. But the red button defenders all seem to be like, nah, it's just a false way of framing it. Like, and they insist that most people, were their lives actually at risk, would end up pushing the red button. Even those who, online, when their life isn't at risk, defend the blue button. Now, I will say, the initial poll, at least the image of it that gets shown in, these discussions I've seen, the initial poll wound up with 56% pushing blue. Not saying that means anything in particular about one side being right or wrong. I'm just saying that's what happened in that particular poll. So anyway, just, I don't know, a little bit of a thinker of a scenario that I've definitely come across a lot of discussion lately and thought I'd put it out there in case anybody who's watching right now might have some particular thoughts that they want to share, or if you completely were not aware of it and maybe we're looking for something to ponder. I don't know. By the way, well, you know what? No, I'm not gonna tell you which I would push, because I'm not gonna sway things. And I definitely don't think the initial question was intended in such a way as to show a leaning towards one option or the other. $15. Well, I did say I was headed for maybe getting 15% complete in an hour. Seems like that is probably holding up, possibly even going to get a little bit more than that. But getting into all those little cracks and crevices there is going to be a bear. Oh, okay. There's one rather large section completed. Of course, if I spend a bunch of time focusing on all these little bits of dirt, maybe I won't necessarily surpass 15%. Okay. I'm like, how come the right one is all clean, but the left one isn't? Charge! What the? Oh, right. That down is to reveal the dirt, not up. Where is there still dirt on this? Tiny bit there. Oh, geez. And I have fallen. Extension! There we go. Okay. Now there is still this side of the pyramid wall, which is a little odd to me. Wait a second. How come way down here? Oh, that's the white part of the wall that it's counting like that. Okay. So there's some of just the white portion over here that's not clean. I'm trying to complete entire sections as I go, rather than leaving tiny little bits of dirt on them. Okay, maybe if I approach this from a top angle. That doesn't seem to be helping. And I can't even really spot any dirt on it. Let me just try getting the corner here specifically and see if that does anything. No, not really. I'm not sure what the deal is with that then, but you know what? I'm not gonna linger on that. You know what? Let me get a little bit of an extension in here. Maybe even longer than that. I don't know if that's really even cleaning it any better per se. I hit 15% at least, but still. Even at that much per hour, like I said, he would take basically 6 hours and 40 minutes, and that assumes a consistent 15% per hour rate, which I think we all know normally the end doesn't go quite as quickly and smoothly as the earlier stages. Yeah, so like that would mean there's a good chance of me taking an entire, seven, I mean, shoot, given how often I've been playing this, which is not that often, would take me an entire, 7 months to complete this. Yeah, I think to some extent right now I'm just cleaning stuff to to add to the percentage cleaned. I'm not necessarily hyper focusing on getting specific objects fully clean at the moment. I mean, I could try to focus on that, but also, like with that one area with the white stone, you know, on the outside, it's just like, sometimes it seems like I've done all that I can. I've gone over everything twice, and still, it's saying I haven't gotten all of it. What the heck? Now, okay, I think there was some other cleaning related simulator type game that I saw a video of lately. Totally forget just about anything about it, though. So I don't know if that's particularly helpful. I'm thinking I probably saw it being played by either Jacksepticeye or Markiplier, probably. And it was within the past month or two, I would say. But yeah, aside from that, really can't remember anything about that. I might have to try and go back and figure out what I'm talking about. But then I might forget it again by the next time I would play this game. Oh, geez. We got an ad break starting up on Twitch here in just a little bit. And by just a little bit, I mean like a minute and a half. I suppose I'll go ahead and keep cleaning until those roll. And then once those are done, I'll do the last bit of exercise before I wrap up the stream. Okay, come on. Just real quick, out of sheer curiosity, let's... dirt. Maybe that was part of my problem out here. I think I might have been pressing the wrong button to try and locate the dirt on this wall. I'm still not really seeing anything. There's a little bit where I imagined it had to be something in, like, the grouting or whatever, maybe. Oh, hey, there we go. I got it. Hooray. We're at 18% cleaned as well. And really any second now, the ads should be starting on Twitch. Again, they delay so much if I don't initiate them myself. I don't know why that is. You would think, if anything, it should kind of be the opposite, because it's like, you know, if it gets to the end of that timer, it's like it knows they're coming and should already be prepared. Okay, well, I suppose that is going to do it for this time. I'm going to make sure that I save. Ugh. Okay. Also, I totally didn't bring it up earlier, but I changed a bit of the face light coloring in hopes of, you know, combating the greenification that I was experiencing from my webcam before. And Seth is trying to push me to get 20% cleared. Probably just because of already being at 18%, which is kind of close. I mean, really, if I was just going to go for 20% straight up, I'd just do a random sweep through all of this stuff that's really dirty and definitely be getting something as I, you know, walk my way through here. Even if this is overall not necessarily super thorough or actually efficient. See, and like, even with doing this, it's still taking multiple passes to even add a single other percentage point of progress. Okay, we're at 19 now. Alright, just because I might end up getting 20% in this stream, that definitely does not mean that I would complete this in 5 such live streams. Because again, the end, like always, takes longer because of all the little bits of dirt that are left behind on things. And honestly, going around doing stuff like this might even make that kind of situation worse at the end. But, I mean, progress is progress, right? Seth, were you seriously suggesting that in hopes of me finishing this in fewer streams? Well, there we go. We hit 20%. Okay. One last little message thing I guess, before we go. Been reports of volcanic activity across the entire Pacific Rim, eh? Really doesn't sound good. No kidding. See, there it is, volcanic activity. Okay. Now, definitely done. Okie day. Now, exercise. One more time. Before I call it a night. Alrighty. I saved, and quitting will probably happen well enough on its own. I think if I just back out of the game into other menus and don't play one, sure. What do you mean? Well, I mean, that's just what's been redeemed so far. Remaining might not have been the best word choice, but one active unredeemed. I guess unredeemed is what I should have said. Okay, well, now I'm doing sit-ups. I will probably get out the exercise mat for that. Maximum 3, maximum normal time. What? I'm confused. What do you mean? 2 was the roll for sit-ups, just establishing that that's what I was doing. I rolled a 6 after that. Oh, the exercise stuff. Maximum possible 3, yeah. At least on a per person basis. I think the changing exercises I limited to just once per stream, and the randomized exercise, I forget what all limits I put on that anymore. Yeah, okay. So sit-ups, sets of 6 with 5 sets attempted. I do not think I have done anywhere near 30 sit-ups in any of these recent streams. But, I'll do as many as I can, I guess. And not necessarily going to keep, like, you know, I'm not going to let myself get to where it's like, all right, do a sit-up and lay down for a while. And then do another sit-up and lay down for like a minute. Okay. Getting up to exercise mat. Because floor is hard and would be rather uncomfortable on back, and especially like right here where the freaking belt loop is in my pants. That in particular is uncomfortable on a hard floor. Okay, shifting the mat as far that way as I can reasonably get it, because I tend to drift this way. At least, well, whichever way I have my head, probably. Okay. Alrighty. Here we go. 1. Oh, jeez. What the heck? Felt something weird in my shoulder there anyway. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. Okay. Is that 9? 10. 11. 12. I think it's probably from the little bit of my feet lifting up and then like getting repositioned further this way or something. I don't know. Anyway. 13. 14. 15. 16. 17. 18. You know, when I was younger, I used to do a whole bunch of these. 19. 20. And I think I'll end it at that to match the percentage of progress in the PowerWash Simulator job. I do also wonder if when I was younger, my form wasn't quite as good. Like, I think I would tend to use my arms a little bit more when doing that. Also, generally, I was doing it at Taekwondo, and I would have somebody holding my feet down, and you wouldn't believe how much of a difference that makes. Well, I mean, if you haven't experienced that yourself, you might not believe how much of a difference that makes. Okay. A little more water. Okay. Yeah, I was definitely not getting to 30 without multiple, like, and like, honestly kind of resting for a bit in between. Okay, well, last call for anything more, because otherwise I'm about ready to send this show on the road, so to speak. AKA raid out to somebody else. So, yeah. Assuming we're all done. Let's, yeah, I was just gonna say what's coming up for live streams. So, tomorrow, Borderlands 4 side questing stuff, specifically in the area called the Fade Fields, and more specifically, we had that one Mercenary Day related quest thing that we kind of left it off in the middle of. So, that's tomorrow. Doing a couple hours of that. Next Thursday will be, well, continuing Job with chapters 17 and 18. And then probably something like a Slay the Spire or Hades or something like that, I'm thinking. To be determined, though, officially. And then a week from tomorrow will be Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory. Going through more of the music of the series. I think wrapping up sort of the Kingdom Hearts 2 related stuff and moving on past that. 2 weeks from today would be Job 19 and 20, and another side quest game thing to be determined. So yeah, there's the upcoming streams, in case you're wondering. And I think I have a channel in mind to send us off to. Yeah, I could potentially do stuff in either of those games. I was kind of thinking I'd prefer to wait until, like, after I've completed my, like, recording stuff of them. But realistically, I don't have to limit myself to that. You're saying Wordy Girl is live. Why am I not seeing her live in my list of channels I follow? Or do I need to, like, refresh the list? Because if she just went live, maybe that's why. Yeah, otherwise, I was going to send the stream to guy that goes by Donnie Dreams. If you haven't heard of him, I became familiar with him when connecting with Christian Ninja and the Taco team. Okay. Wordy Girl's not live anymore. That would be why I didn't see her. Okay. Donnie Dreams it is. So, initiating the raid. That's all I've got for now. Hope you enjoyed the stream. Hopefully I'll see you around soon for another one. Feel free to watch edited stuff on YouTube. That also honestly has a bigger collection of the archived streams and stuff anyway. In case you want to go back to others. And yeah. Otherwise, whatever ends up happening, until the next time I see you, stay cool, everybody.